Today we are here to discuss his book of short stories, To Die in Banaras. These stories were originally written in French and recently translated into English. And again, these stories cover a wide array of human emotions and are deeply rooted in a certain way in myth, legend, elements of spirituality, and make for very, very compelling reading. So there is a lot of things to discuss and to discover in these two books. So I hope we have the time to make, to give full justice to both. So without any further ado, I will start with my first question to both actually on their motivations behind writing this book. So Kavitha, what prompted you to take on this journey, and also how did you come about that you wrote this book?
Okay. So actually I think there are two questions. One is how did I start on this journey, and how did I come about to write this book? The first question is, I had actually thought of this journey when I was a schoolgirl. I was with my cousin Pallavi, who's right here. And both of us had been dreaming of this journey for years. It seemed to be Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar. More than the religious elements, for us, they seem to be places of great adventure and beauty, and they seem to be mystical. And so we wanted to travel to those places because if we felt that it would enrich our lives as people rather than the spiritual aspect of things. Finally, when we started on this journey, we had both turned 40, and we realized we had done nothing that we had wanted to do when we were schoolgirls. All our dreams were being, laid, put on back burner in our quest for, leading our lives, having kids and marriage and careers. So finally, we decided we would do it that year in 2011, and we found a group of people who were traveling there. And so that's how we started this journey. In terms of writing this book, I think I decided to be, my background is not in writing. I'm actually a software developer by training, and I worked for many years, but I was never really excited about making money and working for a corporation. So I ventured into developmental economics, and while that was much more fulfilling and much more interesting, but with my field work in the village, I felt that you could not get at the full version of truth. You just have to look at your research question, and that sort of limits your understanding of the entire truth of the lives of human beings, because human beings are so complex. So I decided that I would start writing, and this is one of the most richest and most interesting experiences in my life. So I thought I'll start writing about that. It started with an essay and just gathered momentum and became into a book.
Yeah, so thank you. That was a good sort of introduction to how you came about actually writing this. I would like to ask the same question of Professor Madavane. What inspired you to write these stories? These stories cover a large area of genre. There is short story, there is suspense, it's like some are like thrillers, and there's a legend. There is also this, one gets a feeling that the protagonists of your stories are gripped in some strange kind of fate, and ultimately leading, they are on a path to, death, as the title says. So my question is, why death? Why Banaras?
Basically, I am a theatre director. As a theatre director, I would like to ask you a favor, especially those who are sitting the last. We would like to see you, unless you have something messaging quietly in that behind. Can you come forward? Okay. Thank you. For me, writing was an accident. I'm very proudly saying that. And even theatre was an accident. So it was in Montreal when the person who was the director of the department, theatre department, asked me to come teach for 1 year the directions and direct a play. And we had to decide about one particular play. And since she have mostly girls, she wanted to have characters are women. So we are discussing for the last 6 months. When I propose one play, and she says, no, not good enough, like that going on. And finally, she said, I remember very well that at 3:30 afternoon, before email time, I received a fax telling that, okay, Madhavan, if you don't direct a play, fine, you will take one more class. I told, no way. I don't want to come all the way to Montreal to take one more class, and for 1 year. So I'll find a play. So slowly, I started writing a play, called Mahabharata Women. So since she want women, I pick it up all the women characters of the Mahabharata and related to one man who will act Bhishma, Arjun, Karna and everything. So there are many characters, women character in Mahabharata, who doesn't have one line to speak in 18 volumes, not even one line. So in my play, they started talking. And when the play was staged, I was expecting a compliment about the play, about the direction. But many famous actors who happened to be my friends in Montreal, what they told, what a text. They was very surprised about the text. Wondering whether they are complimenting just like that or not. And I wrote the short stories called To Die in Benares to be presented for one cultural section, and they liked the text. This is how I came by accident, a writer. I think I answered that questions. The second question is you're talking about the death.
Yeah, why this theme of death and why Banaras, which is really like, when one thinks of India, especially from a Western perspective, you immediately think of Banaras. So what is this, what was this fascination with these two themes?
I'm a happy guy. Don't worry about that. Okay. I'm not fascinated by death. But I think I'm politically very aware. I remember one conversation with my elder sister. We are discussing about, funeral and everything. And she told me, I was 16 at that time. I was 16, and she told me that I will not be incinerated. I'm quoting. I will not be incinerated. I will be buried. It was a surprise. In my family, my father, my mother, they got incinerated. But how come my elder sister was not going to be incinerated? Because she married a family, their tradition is to be buried. And many of my colleagues, students, France, in India, they told, what? In India they bury? They didn't know.
Is it not something to do with the caste affiliations or?
No, not at all. I'll take the example like my mother. My mother coming from a caste, from a family who was burying it. She married my father who was incinerating. I was wondering, why this? So it is in the course of searching for why someone is incinerating, why someone is burying it, with the same caste and approximately the same financial situation. It's simply, probably, it's an economical factor. Burying is easy. You need 2 persons to dig a pit. But incinerating demands more money. The social climbing was based on that. Then the question was for me, when you discuss about in an arranged marriage, everything possible to have a couple to live together happily, the woman doesn't have a right to dispose of her body as she wants. That was the topic of that story. She goes to Benares because she wanted to visit Benares, and she is dying there, and she asks, can I be incinerated? And her husband say, no, because you are going to be buried because you are married with a family who are having that traditions. And she was so dejected. She says, you do whatever you want. You throw my body to the dogs. I have no problem. Now there's nothing.
I think this is the story. This is the title short story. It's the same title as the book, and I think that is one of the very powerful stories which are found there, and also very surprising because, like you say, I mean, one does not imagine that within the same family set up, within the same community or caste or whatever you want to call it, there could be such a fundamental difference in such important rituals. I think it points also to the kind of the country, the complexity of the country we live in, where even within a religion one could have so much diversity, so much difference is possible. Yeah. So that was one story which was really
so much diversity and so much ignorance.
Yes. Yeah. So I would like to just go back and forth between both of you, if you don't mind. So Kavitha, you also write a lot about, not about rituals in that sense, but almost spiritual experiences which you seem to have had during your trip. Like you talk about, I forget, seeing mysterious lights on Lake Manasarovar, and you're finding a Rudraksha mala, magically almost in the lake, and some other such. I mean, I don't want to reveal everything, but I was wondering, what is your own relationship with the spiritual? How do you relate? How much of how do you manage to separate the rational from the spiritual in your narrative? Where does, at one point, I ask myself whether it's rationality which is dictating what you write, or whether it's a deep sense of spirituality. So how would you respond to that?
It's a good question, actually. In terms of there's so many different ways that one thinks of themselves, spiritually, culturally, in many different ways. But there's also certain ways that your culture that you're from thinks of you. So you're placed in a certain narrative based on your culture. There's things that you identify with. There's things that perhaps you don't even know that you feel that you experience, but you experience those things. So I think I identify most as an atheist. I don't believe in things. I do believe in rationality. But having said that, and I still believe, I mean, having gone through this journey, I still do believe that the world is rational. But that doesn't take away from the fact, like you said, that there was a light that I'd seen with my traveler Pratna. And so we were not sure whether it's a light on the lake, because the legend has it that divine beings descend to Lake Mansarovar and people see them as lights, and they're going to bathe in Lake Mansarovar to go and worship Shiva. So we had seen this light, but we were still wondering, is it actually a sort of a divine light, or is it just somebody across the camps, somebody across the lake shining a light in their campsite or something? So it wasn't really clear, but there was, in spite of my rationality, there was this questioning. So that's one thing. The other diversity, I suppose, in beliefs is I was brought up in a culturally very Hindu family and Hindu background. We did do pujas. We weren't terribly ritualistic, but we did have this the rites and rituals to a certain extent. But we also had a very rich tradition of mythology. Like my grandmother would tell me all these stories of Krishna and Shiva and all the gods, and they were fascinating to me. I really loved growing up with them. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to love to dress up like Krishna and try to dance like Krishna when I was a very little kid. So for me, these myths, despite the fact that I was never religious, moved me emotionally, I suppose, at some level. So when I went to these places, it was very surprising to me, in fact, to see how much they resonated to me, given my cultural upbringing and my love of myths. So in some ways, I rediscovered my love of the childhood myths that I grew up with. And so in some ways, I rediscovered my cultural identity as a Hindu, although I don't have beliefs as a Hindu. In fact, I do Buddhist meditation, and I really identify as a person with the teachings of the Buddha. I feel like they're very rationalist, most of them. There's things that I feel are not rationalist. So in one person, you have these varying identities as a rationalist, as an atheist, as a cultural Hindu, as a person who believes in Buddhist teachings. So yeah, I think that speaks to your question of
yeah,
very
and that explains also perhaps why you have tried to weave in so many. It's a slim volume, but you've packed in quite a few of those legends and myths which are prevalent in the areas through which you went through, the regions through which you went through. Yeah. What is your takes on ritual? I mean, is it something which you feel it's part of, I mean, it is, of course, in a way inseparable from, from religion. But through your stories, are you sort of critiquing this in any way? Is it a kind of, shall we take it as a kind of critique of the importance of ritual or over-importance of ritual? Or, I mean, what is your take on this?
In fact, I don't know how to answer this. I'm a science student. I taught 7 years mathematics. It's very difficult to join these two. But I do believe one thing, through poetry, somewhere is guiding you to spirituality. I think I found the most beautiful poetry are the numbers. The numbers in maths takes me to poetry, to so many places. Can you believe that mathematics was developed out of nothing, zero? And we have sent so many rockets to so many places out of nothing. Poetry, for me, is something like that. It touches your art without really knowing why it touches you. So I think basically the teaching maths took me to poetry without my knowledge. And ritual, there is something which is very, very surprising in Hindu religions. I'm not a believer. I'm coming from a family who are superstitiously believers. So I can't blame my mother, I can't blame my sisters and everything. But I never questioned my mother about her spirituality, her belief. When I was supposed to be sick, probably 1 year old, she have done one vow telling that, she will roll me in a hill station. There is a God there if I am becoming healthy. I told mother, why don't you roll? And you are doing that for me. And every time when I'm coming back from Delhi to Pondicherry, very discreetly she says, you have to go to that hill god. Yeah. Then by the time I become 25 years old, and my mother was aging. So one day I told to myself, she is aging, she should not die with that kind of a feeling. Okay, I'll go. And there are steps there. I had to roll that steps. Okay, 25 years or maybe 30, I don't remember. When I took my sister with me, I told that when I am rolling, please take a photo. You have to show this to mother because otherwise she will not believe me. Okay? So then I rolled it. So, it's not that I'm criticizing religions. Each one have the belief. I made my mother happy that day. But spirituality, I don't know what is it. When I'm writing, I'm happy. When I'm thinking about numbers, I'm happy. If that is spirituality, if that is poetry, good, fine. I'm happy about it.
That's a lovely answer. Yeah, thank you. Uh, Another aspect of your book which comes through very strongly is actually in two stories which are set in Pondicherry. So this is the paper boat, and the other one is the sacred cow. So it's all about growing up in Pondicherry as an Indian, but during the time when Pondicherry was still under colonial rule. So it was basically about learning the history of Pondicherry, history of France as one's own, and and the complexities which are produced in the protagonists. Sacred Cow is a biting satire, if I may say so, and Paper Boat is it's a huge, very sad tragedy. So you are known also as a post-colonial writer who writes about these experiences. Where what I observed was that while most post-colonial writings are about the violence which is produced on the colonized countries and the plunder, etc., you have focused more on the psychological aspects of the people who grew up in these in this situation. So would you like to say some more about this?
Yeah, the play, the short stories, I wrote it in French. And it was published in 2010. And the French embassy, anybody here? No. Good. The French embassy, because I'm a teacher of French, and they like to honor them. It's this kind of a freebie. It's important for the teachers. So I'm one who fights. And they wanted, as a senior person, my colleagues, many of them were students, they got all the honors. Okay, but Madavane is not fit for that because he criticizes. He don't come to the French embassy. So when they read the book, and especially this particular stories, these two stories, one is Sacred Cow in Benares, is about one French lady, wife of a top officials, want to go to Benares, and she wanted to be well treated, and she was not well treated. And that is the story. And the first one is about a paper boat, is about a person who suffered from the beginning, from the school level, okay, about this French colonialism. Okay. When these two stories has been read by the officials who are supposed to give me whatever honor is, they didn't, because I'm criticizing it. And when I sent to French publishers, they didn't publish it because of these two stories. Somewhere I was happy. I was happy that it happened. How it was got published? Simply because one friend have a small publishing house, he wanted to publish. And how it got published in English? An accident. Someone, a translator whom I never met, he wanted to translate, he found the publishing house. This kind of a story coming from far, from the childhoods, give an impact on your life. And it's so sad that the type of education that we received during our childhood, teaches not to say, no, I agree, no, I don't agree. It gives you a type of educations which is there, you accept. You accept everything. you know. And one of my school friend in that French school, he lost his only son because he didn't have that courage to tell one of the chokidar, I want to check my class, my child classroom, whether you locked it inside him or not. He didn't have that courage to tell that, I want to double check. He accepted that authority of the chokidar and he's gone. And after 1.5 months, they found the body of the kid dismantled completely. Simply, our education don't teach us to raise questions. You know, so I was telling, I think 2-3 days back to someone that any education to have two aspects. One, transfer of knowledge. The second, to teach them how to use the weapon to question that knowledge. If they don't question that knowledge, the transfer of knowledge is not at all useful.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't realize that they were based on true experiences. So actually, I did ask myself that question, but I mean, it's too horrific to even imagine that it could have been.
It is. In Pondicherry, there was one school.
Yeah.
It happened, and my own wife, you know, if my father-in-law didn't insist, I would have not married.
I actually, when I read that story, the only thing that I felt comforted by was the thought that it's fiction.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Otherwise, it was so.
My elder sister didn't want to see me for 1 week.
So most of your stories are based on some incident which has resonated with you during your experiences. Yeah, okay. And I completely agree with you about what you said about education. In fact, that is what, as a teacher, I also try to, convey to my students, that it's not just enough to listen to me and to take in what I say, but you should, question and ask questions and clarify your doubts. I completely agree with you on that. Yeah.
The teacher also has to be strong enough to say, I don't know.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see some of my students clapping there. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know, but maybe 48 hours I will know.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. Moving again to Kavitha. Since we were talking about identities and, one could not imagine that in independent India one could live in Pondicherry and go through all these complexities and psychological, I don't know what to call it. Well, it's far removed from your situation, but I do believe that there are a lot of issues of identity which come through in your book also. So this complexity of being an Indian, like for example, at some point you say that there is no such thing as Telugu food because it's so complex, and you have encountered different customs and different ways of thinking. So is there anything you would like to share with us from your book, or would you like to narrate that brought out this dichotomy?
Just to address this idea of the colonialism and perspectives and the psychological aspects of it. I actually think when I started writing this book and I started reading some other books written on Kailash and Mansarovar, I found that there were two types of books. One type of book was written by the devoted Indian pilgrim, who for him everything was Shiva, Parvati, and there was no questioning. There was no questioning of these are places. There was no interest in the politics or the geographies of the region. The other type of narrative that was out there about these places, Kailash and Mansarovar, was from the outside in, the Western traveler, who would come in and look at these exotic places and sort of, some of the narration was looking down on the unique cultural practices. Sometimes they were sneering, sometimes they were, sort of these places were exoticized. So there's this outside-in perspective, and the perspective from within the Hindu and Buddhist cultures was very devotional. So I felt like there was nothing in the very few works. I won't say there's nothing. The very few works that were able to come from within the Indian perspective, where these places are part of our own cultural and religious imaginations, but yet look at them as in the broader context of where they're situated, of the Tibetan identities. Because we think of Kailash and Mansarovar as very Hindu, but they're very sacred to Buddhists as well. They're very sacred to Jains. They're very sacred to the local Tibetans, the Bonds, and they are also places in a geography and in a political situation. So I try to bring all those things in. I can do a reading.
Okay. I don't know how we are placed for time. Is it? Oh, we have 5 minutes left.
I think we should just do question and answer.
Okay, then maybe maybe we can open it up. I didn't see that 10-minute thing. Maybe we can open it up to the audience if there are any questions. I'm sure you must be having a few questions. Any questions?
Sure.
Please raise your hand if you would like to ask something.
The first question is always important because it gives the others the courage to ask.
Yes.
Yeah, please, someone has to.
Oh yes, there it is. Thank you.
This is more a suggestion. See, recently, one author from London, she wrote a book, These Empires of the Sindhu River. She got a Booker Prize. I suggest to this team that the Aryans, the other river, Dayu, also starts from the same area of Himalayas. It is picked up from that they came. So this is an unexplored area. They can travel, and again we expect some book from them.
Oh, okay. So it's a suggestion for a book. Okay.
In fact, actually, there are 4 of India's major rivers that originate in the Mansarovar area. You have the Satluj, the Brahmaputra, the Indus, and also the Karnali, which actually merges into the Ganga somewhere in Bihar. So, yes, there are many.
Yeah, there is another. We'll take that and come back to you, ma'am. Yeah. Over there. Yeah.
Thank you both the speakers for a wonderful session. Only thing is that, slight disagreement with what you suggested about burial and incineration is, it is not, I think, about financial situation. It is community specific, region specific. Because even to bury, you have to dig, it takes a lot of money. It is not basically, and among Hindus, the rituals are so strong, traditions are so strong, they don't really mind spending money on a person who died. That's one. And second is about the spiritualism which you talked about. Your effort to sort of live up to fulfill the desire of your mother, pressing your own ideology and willing to take that hardship of rolling over the steps is real spiritualism.
Thank you. Yeah. Would you like to respond to that, or?
I don't know. I was only pleasing my mother. I was not spiritual. Okay, I don't know what can I say more about depends on the regions and communities. I'm coming from Pondicherry, and even those days, there are people who are burying, there are people who are incinerating. And in the same community, both happen. So I thought it was a financial matter. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. We have a question here, the lady here. Please take the mic. Yeah.
It's not
thanks.
really a question. It's I too went to Mansarovar with the same mindset. In fact, my husband refused to come, so I jumped on the wagon with his friend and his wife who went, and I found it extremely challenging and extremely beautiful. And I too had a couple of experiences that I never told anybody for fear of being laughed at, because that was not me. I mean, I'm not spiritual either. But I did have some experiences which were not usual. And I tried to understand. Of course, my brother said it's a lack of oxygen up there. But I think that when you're in such a stark, such a beautiful environment, I mean, there's nothing between you and the universe. So I think it does turn you inward, a lot. And that was the thing about the Mansarovar trip that I found really. I think a lot of Indians from any faith should make that trip.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for your comment. There is a question from, in there.
I have just a small remark regarding the burial and incineration. Actually, the place from where I come in Rajasthan, within the family, there is a difference. Means adult will be incinerated and children will be buried.
Yeah.
And the reason that I found is that because the reason is social. Because when adult dies, the whole village comes. And when the child dies, only family members go. So it requires less effort, as you said, so I agree with that. But I asked once why this difference, so they said, they gave me a quite funny reason, that is that adults qualify more, regarding the next life, and so I was fully not convinced. So I think it's more social reason there.
Thank you. Thank you. We have another question here. Yeah, this gentleman here. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question that I would like to ask to both Kavitha and Madavane. You both spoke about two different aspects of our life. One is rationality or mathematics, which are connected, and the other one is spirituality or poetry. Would you have any suggestions on how one can fit those two into a single person, how one can deal with those two different aspects, being one person?
Could you repeat that last bit?
The question is, would you have any suggestions about how one can fit those two different aspects into a single person? Suggestions, how to do it?
Any suggestion for this? One has to find solution in your own solitude. In your own solitude. I believe in that. I believe in that.
From my perspective, this is Spirello, by the way. He's a friend and a fellow traveler.
I recognize the picture, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I actually do face it because I am a rationalist, and even in my meditation, there is my experiences with Kailash Mansarovar. My cousin Pallavi found the mala, and Pratna and I had seen the light. But beyond that, also in my meditation, I do find have experiences which are things I can't explain, and like you said, I'd be very reluctant to discuss them because I have to understand them on my own. That being said, I think what really is important for me, because I keep asking this question to myself, how do you put these two things into one human being? The thing is that for me, the way I deal with it is I accept myself as a rational human being, and that is how I engage with the world. But my heart and my mind are open to the possibility that there are experiences and that there are explanations that perhaps we don't know yet. So my mind is open to possibilities. And the other thing is, especially when I went on this journey with an atheist perspective, and I saw the faith that, I saw the strength that faith would give people. I saw the kind of great hope that, that these people, the people that I encountered, were living in such great economic deprivation, social difficulties, that they really needed their faith in order to be able to survive in their world. And so you should also be able to open your mind to the fact that other people have their own realities and have their own ways of engaging in the world. We are all very complex human beings trying to live in a very complex and difficult world. I feel like there is a Buddhist saying which sort of summarizes what I think helps me deal with this situation, is to live a happy life in a world full of sorrows. So that's how I